All right, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you guys are all settled in, got a good lunch in, heard the keynote. So not a lot of Zerto-specific questions in that keynote, but that's okay. I'm here to talk about one-to-many. It is a feature that we introduced last year on the 5.0. We did kind of a tech preview last year where we had a session on that and walked through the top 5 use cases. So rather than just replaying those top 5 use cases, I wanted to reintroduce them for those that may not be familiar with it. And then I have a couple customer use cases that I wanted to dive into. I have Jason Glazebrook here from Adams Bacon Trust to join me on stage. And Keenan could not make it. He had a family obligation, so I'll be presenting his slides. But we thought it would be much more valuable for you to see it in real life versus me up here pitching our general use cases that we think might be valuable to you. So my name's Chris Duffy. I'm the Director of Product Management at Zerto. I'm out of the Boston office here. Been with the company just over a year. I think my first week on the job last year was ZertoCon, so they put one of these Z Expert shirts on me and expected me to answer all these hard questions. So I'm a little bit more prepared this time around, as long as you don't ask me hard questions. So just a couple questions. Who is familiar with one-to-many, kind of understands the concept? Okay. All right, good. Anybody else using it or has plans to use it or considerations how it become valuable? Okay. Excellent. Okay. So just to really touch on it, and that's what I wanted to see, because I wanted to make sure, I was hoping that there would be some mind share amongst you so that you could kind of grasp and kind of internalize some of the values that we hope it can deliver for you. So at its simplest, you protect multiple VPG targets, or multiple targets. So you have a single VM, and you can replicate that to multiple locations. Simultaneous replications, the targets can be local, they can be remote, they can be multiple remote, multiple local. You can have anything in between. So with the introduction of different features, whether it's our Azure support, it's our AWS support, it is VMware, it's Hyper-V, it's our valued cloud service provider community. So you have a lot of options on where you want to go to.
Isn't that representation kind of misleading? Because they should not go from the same beginning. Because from what I understand, they all have separate beginnings. Each replication has its own files that are independent from each other. This makes it look like they start from the same place.
Well, it would be the same production site. So same vCenter, same production site, same VM.
All those files,
Yep.
everything is separate.
Well, so if you took the same VM. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. So the picture is not truly representative of the scenario we're talking about, which is somewhat true. It's, marketing gets hold of my slides and puts these, great pictures in there. So he's asking, it's really, it's not all the same beginning, right? But it is the same beginning, it's different endpoints. So you're taking your VM or your application, right, and you are putting it in a VPG, which is our virtual protection group, and then you are moving that to, say, a remote location. And then you can take that same group of VMs and replicate that to another location. It could be local or what have you. So it's the same VMs, it's the same beginning point. And that's the value there. So in a typical scenario, and make sure I don't get ahead of myself. So how we typically see our customers leverage our product, our virtual protection groups, our VPGs, are our consistency groups, right? You put your VMs in the consistency group, and now you have right order fidelity on the remote side, the replication, you're fully protected. You have seconds of RPOs, minutes of RTOs. But what it enables you to do is take an entire application, protect it as a whole, or you could take a component of that application. Maybe it's the database server, it's a single VM, it's the web server, it's something, and now you have the ability to protect that at a more granular level individually. And you could do that locally, and we'll talk a little bit about that use case. So you could have your traditional DR, right? You have all your VPGs replicating from production over to your disaster recovery site, right? So if failure happens, you recover that entire application or whatever you have in that VPG back to your production site. Or you fail over and then fail back. What this allows you to do is you could potentially have a subset of that application locally. So if you have a server or a corrupted database, a server go down, or you lost a file or something like that, now you have the ability locally to recover a subset of that application instead of the entire application. Does that make sense? Up to 3 VPGs in a group, that's one of the areas at the end. I'm going to ask you a question whether 3 is enough. That's not necessarily an architectural limitation on our product. That is a use case that we believe would meet 90% of the needs out there, so that's what we delivered. And if you have desires for 4 sites, 5 sites, and beyond, I'd love to get that feedback. So, and just as you know the product today, right, it's a full replica, it's the journal, it's a consistency group, it's the VM, it's the journal on the target site. So if you have 1 VM and 2 VPGs going to 2 different locations, they have independent journals in a full replica of that VM. They're basically independent copies of each other, so you're fully protected. So the top 5 use cases, as we've seen, and over the course of the year as our customers have adopted it, really holds true. And the first use case, and that's what Jason's going to talk about today, and actually the other our customer has as well, is where you have a local copy. So your traditional DR at the local site, and then you have the local copy, use it in conjunction with other features that we have, like JFLR. So now you have the ability to dig into a single file. Say you get a phone call, someone lost their presentation. You have the ability now to go in locally very quickly at the file level and recover that while not even touching your DR site, your remote DR site. You have the ability to restore, like I said, from a site failure, whether it's the corrupted database or a server. You have migration protection. So this is another popular use case where we have customers that, whether through acquisition or through strategic shifts in their environment, have another data center that they want to bring online and take the old one offline. Maybe they're going to a CSP, maybe they're going to public cloud, maybe they're just going to another data center. So now they have the opportunity to go from A to B, traditionally as they have today. Now they can bring site C online, replicate A to C. Once that's synced up, they basically can take B offline. And now they've migrated to another data center without ever losing protection. Utilize clouds for longer-term retention. And this goes into whether it's a local copy, remote copy. That remote copy is in the cloud. You have the ability to manage varying SLAs based on what makes sense for your business. So we have a journal that goes up to 30 days. Our average, I think, journal from our customer data is about 4 days. So because depending on your workload, the journal can be small, it could be large, depending on the change tracks and things of that nature. So you have the option to potentially have a remote copy with a 30-day journal up in the cloud, right? It's inexpensive to have a DR copy in the cloud. It's more expensive to run in a DR scenario in the cloud, but to actually be protected in the cloud is fairly inexpensive. So you could extend a journal if you want to go back 30 days. If you want, and then you can also manage that in conjunction with a more granular or a smaller journal, like a 4-day or even a 1-day journal. We see customers do a 1-day journal on the local copy and a 4-day journal on the remote copy. And we have customers, considering now going to the cloud and extending that journal and managing multiple SLAs for what makes sense for them. Recovering independent applications, I kind of talked about that. A lot of these use cases, as you see, kind of bleed into each other because of the flexibility of the product, the multiple destinations that you can replicate to and leverage as a DER platform. And with additional features like JFLR and the extended journal, you can kind of mix and match what makes sense for you. Recover individual VMs easily, whether it's locally or whether it's remotely, and we'll talk about that in the customer scenario as well. Any questions thus far? Does it all make sense? Yeah.
If you have two different configurations, so one going local and one going to your DR site, do you have to maintain the same VPGs for both, or can you set them up differently?
So they are separate VPGs. So yeah, let me take a step back. So when you're doing this in the product, you're basically creating two independent VPGs. So you create the VPG. Say you want to protect your entire application. So you're putting in those 10 VMs that make up that application. All right, you create you create the VPG, you put all your settings in, and now you have that full application protected. Say it's at the remote site. Now you go in and create another VPG, and you just put in the web server or the app database or what have you, and now you have a subset of that application protected, and say you want to just put that locally. So you have the ability to just recover the database and not the entire application if there's a corruption or something like that. So completely different VPGs that essentially don't know about each other. And this is helpful so that there's no interdependencies on each other, and they replicate into their locations with the settings that you've set.
That's very helpful. So the 3 VM limit?
Yep. So you could do 3 targets. One production copy, right? So that's your data. And then you could have 3 copies of that in various locations, whether it's local, 3 local copies. I'm not sure why you do that, but maybe there's a business case for that, and I'd love to hear it. But 1 remote, 1 local is a very popular one. From everybody I've spoken to, I think 1 customer in the past year has said they may have a use for more than 3 copies, but again, that feedback is welcome. Does that make sense? Matt?
Chris, so if you triple the number of targets, right, which is what you can do with this feature, in the wild, are you seeing people needing to size up the source VRAs by 3? As the default VRA sizing, I think, is 3 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
Do you see people in the wild going up to 9 gigs?
Well, no, it's a good question, and so this would be no different from creating multiple independent of one-to-many, you're creating multiple VPGs. So it works the same way. There's no extra strain on the VRA or the application. So with that, I'll step off to the side a little bit and let Jason talk a little bit about his use case. So thank you, Jason.
First, I'm curious to how many Zerto customers we have, active customers in the room, and one-to-many users, actual users. 1. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. So I do work at Adams Bank and Trust. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. It's headquartered out of Ogallala, Nebraska. It is a nice place to live, but it's far away from everything. We have 5,000 people in our town. There's probably more than that here in this convention center today. We are a family-owned bank, a regional bank that has been in that family for over 100 years. We just celebrated our 100th year anniversary last year. A huge party brought people in from all 19 branches. I don't think we have the branches up there. We do have 19 branches. Each one of them served with a private MPLS data line, except for 2 that's slightly different for various reasons. And we do serve Colorado, Nebraska, and we have 1 branch in Kansas. From what I learned in the banking business, once you get 1, it spreads from there. 200 plus employees. I think the last count I did was 205. That changes on a weekly basis with that many employees and spread across that large of an area. So that's a little bit about me. I started working there 2 years ago. We became a Zerto customer last year on version 4.5. This year in March, I believe it was, we upgraded to 5. I'm not sure when 5 came out. And we did that for the one-to-many feature that they were adding. So Zerto brought with it and the promise last year of the ability for us to do DR in-house. We had what is, in my opinion, a crazy DR system. It was all we had available to us at the time. It was all third party. We had no hands-on, no visibility to it. Anything we wanted to do, we had to call them up. And the one that really surprised me was when we wanted to do a test, the whole thing had to go, the whole bank. It wasn't one section of this server, that server. It was everything, and your live stuff was offline till it came up, and if it didn't work, it stayed offline until you brought it back up. I do not know what that process was like to test it and verify it. I know that they did not want to do it ever again. So in Chem, a chance for us to do a hardware refresh, and Zerto came along recommended with it by our vendor. And initially, we didn't have the one-to-many ability, so what we did is we used a Dell product called vRanger. So our DR site was 1 day behind 24-hour RPO. Our local site was doing pretty good because we were using Zerto locally. That's how we started out. You can see we had Citrix. That was a real pain. We literally had to make images of our Citrix servers, our golden images, and send them in, and then when they would get it updated and send it back. Sometimes we had another image ready before we got the first one back. Crazy idea there, but it was all we had at the time. We still use tape, but prior to Zerto, all of our file recovery, somebody forgot that they needed a file they deleted. It was all done by tape. It was all 24-hour minimum RPO on it. We know the story of that already. And as it says at the bottom, we protect about 12 terabytes of data. It's funny the way data spreads around. That's about as good an estimate as I can make for that. So here's our layout now. On our production site or protected site, we have 2 hosts. All 3 hosts are identical. Our business can run off of 1 host with a slight bit of room to grow. We have to maintain a certain growth in the life of our hardware or to allow for it. So up until this year, that left box was all we had for Zerto. And then we went, this year we added our DR site. It happens to be in a town about 50 miles away, and we have a 1 gigabit connection to that site. I've done test failovers and single file recovery from the remote site, as well as we do it pretty regular at our local site. We only have about 50 servers. We don't have the load at a lot of the things I've heard around here. Zerto runs without a hitch. We don't even know it's there most of the time, except when we go to look for it, and it's always been there. I didn't really go into it. In our protected site, we're continuously running 50% load on each host. We have direct storage. Let me see if that's on the next one. It doesn't look like it is, but we have direct storage on each host. For those of you that decide to go to direct storage, and I know there's arguments both ways, I've heard most of them in our hardware refresh last year. Zerto makes it easy to move large machines across hosts. You still have to bring them down. You don't have the vMotion capability that you have built into VMware. I don't know if I said it, we are a VMware shop. But VMware offers a feature, but it literally copies the data over. Zerto keeps it fresh all the time. It literally shuts the machine down on one and brings it up on another, just like a move operation in Zerto. We've had to do that for hardware refreshes. Makes it easy to have direct storage and, hardware updates to our host. Then we use either or for whatever reason. We change now. We have two sources for recovery if we need it. Currently, we have about 2 recovery operations per week, pretty small overall. Without Zerto, I think we would have had a hard time. I'm new at this facility, so I may be a little bit wrong, but I think we would have had a really hard time bringing DR in-house without Zerto. If any of you are in the financial business, you'll know that the compliance that's put on you is horrendous. Zerto takes that away from us. We just went through an exam, and it went really well for anything relating to our data management as far as disaster recovery. And we didn't even have our second site in Zerto yet, but we could show them what we could do with it. Obviously now we can restore files from pretty much any point in the day. And I think that's it. We talked about something outside that you thought would be good to mention. Do you remember what that was? Yeah. Well, somebody else might have the same question you had. Any questions out there? Yes.
How did the leadership at the bank think about the 50, you said it was about 50 miles from the remote site? Did they think that was adequate, or were they hoping for more?
We have locations that are at least 300 miles from our home office. I'm not sure why that was chosen. That was actually chosen before I started, and it wasn't implemented until last year, which was about a year and a quarter after I started. And that was the plan when they hired me. That's the talk that was in at the time. So I don't know how that decision was come about.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you use the on-site replication primarily for like just the things you mentioned, like file capability and all? And so how often do you see use of that?
We recover files about twice a week of one fashion or another. Sometimes it's entire folders. But no, we wanted to have a local copy running. I do know this. We have 2 on site, so we could have a local copy running without maxing out one server all the time with a full load. Because there's just times where you have to do work, and there's a network component that has to be changed if you're running from your DR site. So that removes that for us, and it allows us a lot of leeway on our hardware. It's kind of a win-win in that regard. Okay, I can't remember yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So Matt, I'm sorry, not to put you on the spot. You can stay seated if you want. You can come up. But so I hadn't realized he was using one-to-many, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know Matt. And so I know that you said it's a little tactical right now. How are you using it? Can you talk more broadly about how your intentions?
Don't mind talking about it. So we had an audit of all of our SQL servers, and it turned out we actually had some Oracle in our environment. I'm sure everyone in the room, some of you might be aware of Oracle's draconian, the licensing model they can enforce on you. So we actually had a project where we moved all of the Oracle workloads to dedicated hosts out of our blade chassis, off of shared storage, and moved them really onto an island and of themselves. We don't own vSAN, so we have 2 hosts, and we're just using remote copy for DR, and we're doing a loop back to the other host for HA.
Okay. Oh, very good. Awesome.
Does the Oracle licensing not count for local copy? They just skip that. You don't have to incriminate yourself.
A lot of different consultants, a lot of different lawyers talking about what they can do, what they have done, what they like to do. I'll be honest, I was part of the project, and after 2 weeks of it, I'm still completely not 100% clear on what the real requirement is for the local license.
Gotcha.
So we definitely err on the side of caution.
Okay.
I mean, if you read what they
Thanks, Matt. So the second use case is Keenan worked with him to understand his use case, Points West Community Bank. So they're similar in the Midwest, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, total assets of pushing 600 million. Locally owned community bank, one data center, 16 banks, branches. So some of their early challenges was primarily around backup. Was they've tried all those products that you see up there. None of them could keep up and do the job. He had some really, I had to really ask him 3 times because I didn't believe him. But they had to physically take the backup server, put it in his car, bring it to the local site, set it back up so that it would become current. And then they'd drive it back and put it at the DR site and go through that same process over and over again. I literally asked him a couple times if that's exactly what really happened. And then they also wanted the ability to restore locally. Again, the use case we're talking about similar to Jason's with one-to-many. So 60 VMs locally and remotely, dedicated 100 meg link, replicating between sites. They really wanted it. They had the remote DR, so the different components. So originally they had the remote and then introduced the local, which was a reverse of what Jason was doing. But the key benefits that they really garnered from deploying such a solution, as you can see, so all VMs now were current, and really they said after trying all those applications, all those tools, if you will, Zerto was the only one that could really achieve what they were looking to achieve. You know the story. This is what we talk about all the time. So they have an average of 15 seconds RPO and RTO. No, on the remote. You're right. All right. Sorry. RPO of 15 seconds on the remote site and 5 to 10 seconds on the local site. And while I was on the phone with him, he brought up his little mobile app and verified that for me as I was creating the slides with him. So restoring locally for performance of speed of a similar virtual machine VM level, file, server level recovery. The granularity and the speed is really what drove him to introduce that and not have to go to that remote site. And then they conduct, while doing that, they still are able to, via the remote DR site, achieve their audits and compliance requirements. So I'm sure he would have run through that with much more in-depth, but he wished he was here, but couldn't join us, so I wanted to at least carry that forward and represent a couple customers that are leveraging it, both similar use cases. Matt certainly introduced another use case that's he's going to gain value from. Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
Because I tried to set it up, because we were trying to move VM from one VPG to another, just to make sure it was protected the whole time. And I was waiting for the first VPG, and it told me we couldn't add it to the second VPG.
Because it's going to the same vCenter on the remote side.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think there was a limitation that we actually were aware of on the local side, so not replicating within the same vCenter. So you're saying it's on the remote side. So let me look into that. I believe that you can, but if you want to take that offline, we can. Yeah.
Are there any special considerations when the VPG has one or more database servers?
Special considerations regarding what? You said the question was if it had multiple database servers?
Yeah, for one of many, is there best practices for that? Keeping all the database servers in a separate VPG, or can it be included in regular application?
Yeah. So you're talking about, I'm sorry, let me replay it back. So multiple applications, taking the databases out of those applications, putting it in one VPG. You certainly can do that, right? And then you'll have consistency across those databases. Yeah. Yeah.
application,
Yeah.
but I thought in maybe previous versions, there was like a best practice that separated that and keep the
Yeah, so yeah, I guess the question is twofold. One, can you do it? Yes. Two, is it a best practice? And so, yeah, I'm not sure. So, yeah. So is there so we talked about the limit of 3. Do you guys see a need for more than that? That's a question I typically ask, because architecturally we can go beyond that, but we didn't see a demand for it. So you,
I don't know if I'd do this, but maybe test dev, you would have different environments you
Yeah.
want to go to.
Yeah.
Keep them all consistent.
okay,
I think long-term for us, 3 is the magic number. I see us
Okay.
obviously DR,
yeah,
local backup copy, and then potentially offsite backup copy.
yeah, okay. Well, great. Yes.
Is there a use case for one-to-many for building dev test environments, or is that more of a clone function?
So building test dev environments, I mean, you can migrate maybe I don't understand the question. So you can migrate your environment via Zerto to a remote location. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, well, I want to use Zerto to spin up dev environments
Yep.
as needed for the test team when they want to test.
Sure.
Is that a function of one-to-many, or is that a function of other functions of Zerto?
Well, I think so I think one-to-many, so you can do that with Zerto today. The one-to-many allows you to do that without actually impacting your current DR implementation, right? Instead of using the license to go and do your traditional DR, now you have another leg which you can go and now migrate or move your test dev environment up to a different location, up to the cloud or what have you, I think. Is that, okay, thank you.
Yeah, you could use the clone operation.
Yeah, that's a good point, yep.
Do that to a second site.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see a lot even not using one-to-many. You do the replication, then you can clone it off of that DR site and use that as your.
Yeah, so I think one-to-many is pretty useful for creating the test dev environments. If you're doing it locally, you're protecting it remotely, and then you can also have another VPG going locally, and then do the offsite call locally, depending on where your dev environment is. If it's on the same location, that'd be a good use case.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you do offsite call on that local VPG.
The local copy has to go to its own vCenter, right? Is that what you said, or vCenter?
So I'm right out here in the wish list booth, in the product demo booth. So before I mislead you, let me, I can follow up with you right out there, because there's some of the product owners that are part of dev that can address that. Don't know off the top of your head, do you? If it can replicate to the same vCenter, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what the local replication is.
Oh, so it's the same vCenter.
Anything else? Questions? Yes?
So we were told that the pricing model for one-to-many for CSPs wasn't quite.
Correct, yeah. So there's some, so there are implications or considerations from a CSP, one-to-many, clients bringing their own license. They already have their license. How do we handle that? So the target so we have CSPs in pilot right now. That gentleman my colleague, Mike Kusit's managing some pilots, some CSPs in pilot. And we look to enable that in 5.5 U1 timeframe. So with 5.5 release U0, we won't be supporting that, but we didn't really see that very impactful to CSPs because they never adopt U0. They're, traditionally slower to adopt the new releases than enterprise customers because they have other considerations like end user clients that they don't have total control over. Yeah.
So earlier on, you mentioned to basically treat them like two separate VPGs if you're running a one-to-many replication.
Yep.
Because it essentially is. And I think that answers a lot of what I was wondering about the implications of something happening to one replication and not the other. But is there anything where we shouldn't look at VPGs? Like I assume that, setting that some disks are swap disks and setting zero
So can't, I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
So like, because you just think of it as two separate VPGs.
Yep.
From the same source. That means that questions about like what happens if like destination CBM goes down
Mm-hmm.
is fine. It's just the
Yeah.
other one still works because the other one's a separate VPG.
Yep.
Or what happens if you want to set like a swap or temporary drive on one that's just a separate
Yep.
VPG. But is there anything where like you can't really think about it like separate VPGs because it's coming from the same source?
Nothing comes to mind. No, yeah. I look around some of the, yeah, I can't think of anything that would have any implications there. Okay, good. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for Jason for joining me on stage, and Matt with sharing your experience as well. So again, we're outside on the product wish list booth and the product demo booth. So if you have any other questions, feel free to come by. Thanks so much.